Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. We are working on Sir Thomas More, and today we get to hear from the Earl of Surrey to finish off what some versions call Act 2, Scene 5, and what other versions call Act 3, Scene 1. But this is the scene wherein the Londoners who were rioting are meeting the consequences of their riots. Sir Thomas More had said that he would try to plead for clemency with the king if they all surrendered themselves, which they did, and they were taken to jail, but then the sentence came down that they had to be hanged. So the gallows was set up, and there was such a big crowd that they couldn't get them through on a cart. They had to chain them together and walk them to the gallows, and they're like, all right, Lincoln, you're first. And he's like, okay, sorry, that was a mistake, and I hope everybody can learn from me. And then he basically hanged himself. He jumped off the gallows without having to be tortured, or without having to be pushed. Tortured is also a good way to put it. And then Dal Williamson was like, please let me be hanged before my husband because I can't stand to watch him die. And they're like, sure. And Clown Betts was like, if we're filling requests, I'd like to not have to be hanged at all. And they're like, no, it doesn't work that way. And in yesterday's speech was after, I think. Anyway, they all blend together. But we heard from Dal Williamson that she was kind of okay with dying, a little bit upset that her children are going to be left behind to be raised by somebody else, but she understands that these are the consequences of her actions, so she'll go with it. And just as she was about to die, the Earl of Surrey comes in with a pardon from the king because Sir Thomas More, who has at this point been knighted and named to the Privy Council, made such a compelling argument to the king that the king has pardoned all of these prisoners. And they look and they're like, well, we're a little late for Lincoln, sorry about that. But everybody else gets to be pardoned. And Sir Thomas More was so good at convincing the king of what he did to quell these riots that he's been also now named Lord Chancellor. And everybody's like, hooray, huzzah! And Dal does like a 180 where before she was like, yeah, I'd like Thomas More a lot more if he'd actually kept his word and been able to save our lives. After this pardon comes through, she's like, praise the name Thomas More forever and a day, forever and a day. And the Earl of Surrey steps in to say, in hopes his highness clemency and mercy, which in the arms of mild and meek compassion would rather clip you, as the loving nurse oft doth the wayward infant, than to leave you to the sharp rod of justice, so to draw you to shun such lewd assemblies as beget unlawful riots and such traitorous acts that, striking with the hand of private hate, maim your dear country with a public wound. O God, that mercy, whose majestic brow should be unwrinkled, and that awful justice which looketh through a veil of sufferance upon the frailty of the multitude, should, with the clamours of outrageous wrongs, be stirred and wakened thus to punishment. But your deserved death he doth forgive. Who gives you life, pray all he long may live. So he's trying to remind them to put things in perspective here, that this was actually the king that did it, not Sir Thomas More. He's like, you all should be so lucky. It was only because the king decided to grant you mercy, and his mercy is the same exact kind of mercy that could have smacked you down and put you in your place, because what you did, these riots, were unlawful and dangerous for the whole country and shameful for the whole country. He's like, he could have smote you just now, but he chose not to. He chose to grant your life. So be thankful to the king. And they're all like, God save the king, long may he live. And that's the end of either Act 2, Scene 5 or Act 3, Scene 1, depending on which version you're currently reading. So it's an interesting, I can understand why some versions want this to be Act 2, Scene 5 rather than the start of Act 3, because it does feel like sort of the closing of a chapter of a book. We've gotten to know Sir Thomas More through this uprising, this riot in London against the foreigners, and that riot has been quelled, and Sir Thomas More is now a knight. He was named to the Privy Council, and then he was promoted even further to become the Lord Chancellor. So that feels like a nice little button to put on things before you get into the next stage of his life when he is the Lord Chancellor. So I can understand people wanting that to be the end of Act 2 instead of the beginning of Act 3. But either way, we still gotta figure out what happens in Sir Thomas More's life during the period of time when he is the Lord Chancellor. And if you know your histories and you know the history of Henry VIII, you can probably guess how this is going to end, but we still got to figure out how we're going to get to the end. And I will see you tomorrow as we dig in deeper to find out exactly that. I'll see you then. Mwah.